Hi everyone. On July 20th, the Holy Orthodox Church celebrates the memory of a relatively recent saint who was neither a priest or a deacon or a monastic of any kind, and his name was Ilia the Righteous. Now, Ilia was born in Georgia back in 1837, and he had very pious parents who were trying to raise him in the law of God, and in fact they also raised him early on at home. He was perhaps what we would call a homeschooler today, at least for a certain period of time. Eventually he went on and finished high school, and then after that decided to go to St. Petersburg in order to study law. Now, he spent about 4 years there, and while he was there he began digging into the history of the Georgian nation, and particularly its language and many other aspects about it. He was someone who was enthralled with his own country, so much so that he decided to abandon the study of law and return to his native Georgia in order to continue as a historian and as a philosopher. His enthrallment with the language of Georgia led him into even deeper studies, and he became very concerned that the language would perhaps be forgotten, and he knew that it was very important to keep this alive. And so he emphasized this whenever he could. In fact, he said at one point that there were 3 things that were very important as far as he was concerned about his fact of becoming or being a Georgian, and also propagating the idea of national independence. And those 3 things were the motherland, the language, and the faith. Much of his life was devoted to the idea of Georgian independence and to the future autocephaly of the Georgian Orthodox Church. He put all of his efforts into this, and as a result bore much fruit, because he established a certain amount of scholarship in regards to Georgian folklore and to the Georgian Orthodox Church, and was also very concerned that Georgians themselves did not forget their past, did not forget their heritage. He said this was absolutely critical in the establishment in the 20th century of a Georgian national identity. Even though he was largely a child of the 1800s, he foresaw what was coming, and he was very insistent that the Georgians be grounded in all of these important things, reviewing their history, reviewing everything that they had been through in order to prepare themselves for the future. We could perhaps use a man like that even today, so cognizant of the importance of national identity. Well, as time went on, he encountered a lot of resistance because of this emphasis on all things Georgian. The nascent socialist movement was rising, and it was also becoming something that was going to have to be dealt with in the future. Ilia knew this. He was very aware of what the trend was tending to be in Europe, and particularly against many of the Slavic countries, and including his own Georgian country, because they were so immersed in the midst of all of this. And eventually, as he was riding out in a carriage one day, before he got to a forest, as he was riding with his wife Olga, some social democrats came upon them and assaulted them and shot Ilia to death. Well, after this, these perpetrators of the murder of this righteous man were indeed brought before a Georgian court. But his wife came to the judges and begged them to release his murderers. She said that if Ilia had survived the assault, this is indeed what he would have done, thinking that they were just countrymen who had been unfortunately led astray. This is something she thought was very, very important. Well, as time went on and we moved past beyond the 1907 date of the death of Ilia the Righteous, Finally, in 1987, the Georgian Orthodox Church deemed that Ilia was indeed to be counted among the saints, not just because of his work for Georgian nationalism and the keeping of the language, but for his deep dedication to the church and the fact that he had written a poem even years before that basically said, God forgive anyone that would do any harm to him. And as his wife remarked, this was something that Ilia was very, very much wanting to propagate in the nature and language of the Georgians of his age, the idea of forgiveness, the fact that he wanted to rescue Georgia from a lot of the outside influences, and even worked really hard to contradict those who were writing histories that were simply not true in Georgia. He also wanted the spirit of love and forgiveness to be everywhere. And so in 1987, when he was glorified as a saint by the Georgian Orthodox Church, he was indeed glorified as Ilia the righteous, someone that we could all take to heart today because he was not that far from us, and he was dealing with many of the things that we are dealing with even in our own country now, showing that if these sorts of things can happen in a country that was as intensely Orthodox as the country of Georgia, then certainly in our own country these things are even more probable. But instead of coming back at people with a spirit of vengeance or hatred or even violence, we should do as he did and forgive them, because by doing that, we acquire the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, who in the end is the one that can make peace to spread everywhere.